Once you've got your images converted into grayscale, one of the great little effects that you can do here inside of Camera Raw is start to add a little bit of color back into these in the form of a split tone. And what the split tone is actually introducing color into both the highlights and shadow areas of the image to introduce more of a duotone or cross-tone type image. So let's go ahead now and we'll take a look at how to change this particular image into a nice split-toned image. So I'll go ahead and I'll click on the split tone icon up here in the Camera Raw options up here, and what we're going to do is we're going to start introducing some different tones into both the highlights and shadow areas. So first off, you need to pick a hue for your highlight areas. So I'm going to start dragging this slider over, and as I do this, you'll notice that I'm not getting any type of visual feedback as to what hue I'm actually selecting here on the left hand side of your screen. You're not seeing anything update, and that's simply because the saturation of this is turned down to 0. You want to get a full saturated preview of whatever particular tone you're hovering over at any given time inside of this dialog box. Simply hold down the Option key on Mac or the Alt key on PC and then drag that slider to the right. You'll see here that I get a nice idea of exactly what kind of tone I'm introducing to those highlighted regions. So for this particular image, I want to introduce a nice blue. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select probably in the range of 225, something like that. Introduce a nice blue tone there. And then I can go ahead now and adjust the saturation to determine exactly how much blue I want to bring in. So I'm going to go ahead and saturate this probably at about 25 to 30. Let's go ahead and push it up to 30 right there in the saturation. That way I have just a little bit of blue pushing into those highlighted regions. Not a full saturation by any means, but we've got some nice blue tones happening in our highlighted regions. And now let's go ahead and we'll do the same thing for our shadows. So let's come down here. I'm going to hold down my Option or Alt key again, and I'm going to drag this slider here to determine exactly what tone I want in the shadow regions. And this time I think I'm going to pick probably a dark red or maybe even a light purple type color. So let's go ahead, we'll select somewhere in the region of 330 for the hue number, and then we'll adjust the saturation by dragging the slider down here to the right. So I'm going to keep introducing color until I see enough of it to where I have both the blue and this sort of deep purple color in my image. And now you'll see here that I have both the magenta color and the blue color in this image. The magenta, of course, is in the shadows and the blue color is in the highlights. However, in this particular image, the magenta seems to be taking over the blue tone that we've introduced to this image. So what we need to do now is adjust the balance of this, because I want this to be as evenly balanced as possible. So in order to do that, you just take this balance slider, and if you want more of the highlight tone to be introduced into the image, go ahead and start dragging it to the left, and you'll notice that that shadow tone becomes a little bit more muted and you get more of that bluish tone introduced into this image. Now if I want to get a little bit better contrast with this image, I'm going to go ahead and change the hue of this top setting here for the highlights, because these two colors that I have selected now are just a little too close to one another for me to get a decent split tone. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to drag this and I'm going to take it down maybe into a green color like so. So I'm going to drag that down to about 150 for that hue value, and now you see here that I'm getting a nice split tone between the green and the darker purple or magenta color here. So now I can more accurately adjust the balance of this image to get the split tone look that I want. So let's go ahead and start dragging this back, and we'll jump from our starting point. Here is the 0 starting point right here on this image. And so what I want to do, there's still a little bit more shadow area than I would like in this image. So let's go ahead and keep dragging this to the right, and we'll see how far we can take this while still maintaining the balance evenly across the board. Now if I drag this to about plus 35, it should be right at the amount that I need it to be. So here's pretty much an even split between this green area and this dark red area here. So you can see kind of the creative effect that you can get with this. And the greatest part about this is all of these edits that you're doing here inside of Camera Raw are non-destructive edits. All of these things are stored parametrically in the image data so that when you place this into Photoshop or something like that, you will have no problem coming back in here and tweaking these settings to change them at any given time. So for instance, if you wanted to come back at a later time and change these hue values here to be two different colors, you could do so without altering any pixels, simply because you're only working with that raw camera data each and every time you open up your Camera Raw files. So this again is just how to utilize these split toning sliders to add a little bit more of a creative finish to your black and white converted images.